Alright guys, looks like we have more Three Houses representation coming up. So that's either very exciting for some of you, or probably very disappointing for others. Either way, I'm not here to create a debate on whether Three Houses needs to be in the game or not, but I will definitely look at the characters and provide you with the information you need to, well, should you pull, I guess. Let's go.
Let the lesson begin.
What's up guys, Akariss here, bringing you another Fire Emblem Heroes video. Today's video is going to cover the brand new Abyss and Múspell banner. I was initially on my impressions video unsure whether I was going to cover either Yuri or Múspell because, like, you know, I want to, with every banner, to basically be able to cover a single unit that I feel is most impactful to the game. But honestly, between Múspell and Yuri, they're both very interesting and deserve some attention in this video, so I will definitely do that. And yeah, so Yuri and Múspell, and there's plenty of cool ways that I think we can potentially use them. They are permanent cool units, so you likely will see them in the future. In fact, I'm almost certain you'll see them in the future, because, like, should you pull right now? Probably not, because the Three House banners always win the Twitter revotes, and the banner is going to come back. So that already is like a, well, if you're unsure how they'll affect the meta, maybe just waiting to see what happens on the revival, how impactful they are, might be the way to play it. That would be like the preface of all of this, guys. But yeah, so we're going to talk about Yuri, we're going to talk about Múspell. I'm going to give you guys the community poll kind of statistics there, how people on YouTube voted, how you guys voted, how my community on Patreon and Discord voted as well, and some comments to go along with that to create the full picture and hopefully help you make a decision on whether this banner is worth your orbs. Probably not for most of you, but there's still some good things to talk about here, and nonetheless, should you get one of these characters in the future, you could always revisit this because I'm pretty confident in how they'll develop. So let's do it. First up, smash the like button, sub if you haven't already, and with that, thank you very much. Let's go. Alright, Yuri's stat spread as shown in the video is, as you can see on the left here, which is very offensive oriented to pretty much no one's surprise. His latest generation of BST means that his defensive stats are actually fairly okay, fairly good, I guess, but that's not really the selling point of Yuri. What is the selling point of Yuri is going to be, obviously, his foul play mechanic, and of course that he is actually going to really work as an amazing arena unit potentially because of that foul play mechanic. And because of a merge bring him to 180 stats, he doesn't actually need Sea Dual Infantry 4, and that can actually be subbed out for something else. When I go to arena builds, we'll talk about that a little bit more, but essentially he is a very unique unit in a lot of ways. Starting with the weapon, it gives Canto a predetermined 2-movement Canto, it's slaying, and he becomes a cavalry unit similar to Brave Alm. Combined with the foul play mechanic, which is shown on the screenshot on the left here, with a range of 3, it's like a 3-range swap essentially. He's able to swap a unit out of danger and then Canto wherever he wants to be. Now, I feel the most practical application of foul play and Yuri is going to be for hit and run strategies. This is a obvious way to do it. And the first build I'm going to feature that involves that is no doubt a AR offense, disarm, trap way of doing it. Believe it or not, in my experience, dual skills, dual level 4 skills are actually pretty good in AR. They're actually not a meme. The reason is they're essentially Fury 2 without recoil, and 5 HP helps out range units as well because it helps you dodge stuff like Panic Manor and Tactics Room where you encounter occasionally buildings that aren't up to that level. When you factor in Mythic Blessings, you hit all the way up to like the 71 HP and whatnot, with 4 mythics, or 66 in the case of this build here. So, you know, that is going to be pretty good to give himself bulk, it gives him stats, everything is pretty solid in the A slot. It doesn't really need to be like removed. Switching out Glimmer for Moonbow is a good way to go about this. That way he just basically always has a Moonbow charge and is able to contribute at least some sort of damage to the enemy team. And that whole HP attack again adds upon this, which is like HP is actually pretty solid stat because you can dodge certain buildings that check because he is a range unit at the end of the day. The thing I really like about Yuri is of course Disarm Trap, but instead of being an initiator, he plays into a sort of support role where someone like, let's say, ninja, or Legendary Leaf goes in first, initiates, kills some stuff, and tries to get out. So instead of using a dancer, Yuri with 3 movement and a 3 range foul play is going to have some incredible range to get that unit out of danger, and then Kanto himself out of danger. And if you even combine this with another dancer like Peony, and another foul play perhaps, or just like another reposition, whatever, there's a lot of flexibility in how he's going to likely be used, and will open up just a lot of doors in how you can go about using him, to be totally honest. So I like his AR offense potential. You don't really need more than a single copy to get this done, but at the end of the day, I don't even really think it's deserving of a single like spark or even 40 summons. I'm going to be totally honest with you guys, just my opinion on this. Despite how many doors it opens and such, at the end of the day, he is competing with a support slot to do this. So what that means is, like, let's say you did use Legendary Leaf, you'd have that open support slot with where Yuri could potentially be that slot, or it could just literally be another dancer like a Heron or Duo Sigurd or something, whatever. And, you know, is Yuri that much better than particularly those characters? That's where I feel the contested kind of role overlap comes into play. And at the end of the day, Disarm, Trap, Foul Play, and his Kanto mechanic will help you, but it's not necessarily going to straight up win a lot of games, in my opinion, compared to the other support options that are so many at this point in the game. So cool, very cool mechanic. I like new mechanics like this, but I don't know how I feel about it at the end of the day. So I'm going to reserve my opinion on that until we actually see some play that would really shock or surprise me. All right, so on defense, he has another great place, and that's because he's literally a cavalry unit. A cavalry unit with access to infantry skills doesn't really need much more introduction. You get a lot of access to a lot of skills that the Cavs cannot use. So obviously, Times Pulse, No Follow-Up, Sturdy Impact. What do you notice out of the build presented to the left here? Yeah, it's just a bunch of skills that Cavs can't use, which is really good because stuff like Sturdy Impact or just Impact in general is really important for Cavs. Null Follow-Up, again, is super important for Cavs to survive or just like kill through certain units, and Times Pulse can special accelerate really potent specials like Luna, for example. So Yuri is going to be pretty solid. Now, the thing is, if you combine him with stuff like Brave Alm and, you know, mythics that are prerequisites anyways, like Not or Brammy, and you combine Infantry Pulse and Times Pulse, we're kind of going like back in time here, where you essentially are creating an Infantry Pulse team using a Cav team with infantry. So it's like you're combining Infantry Pulse and the best benefits of Cavs, and that's a pretty scary meta that I probably don't want to see. Stuff like Pulse Smoke will definitely be favored again, or a Pulse type potentially, but if you combine the threat range of 3 movement and infantry skills like No Follow-Up, Sturdy Impact, and Infantry Pulse, and things get a bit scary. So I'm going to hope that stuff like Brave Alm and Yuri are the exceptions to this whole movement meta, so to speak, and we don't just start seeing it on like every single infantry and create this sort of movement. I mean, we're already kind of there with Pathfinder and Kanto, but it's not something that I'm like super keen on seeing, where it invalidates a movement type like cavalry. If you want perspective, what I'm saying here is like armors have their save skills, they have their fighter skills. You know, infantry have their pulses and no follow-ups and somewhat of impacts. Some of the stuff is shared, of course. And flyers have, you know, mobility, I guess, and rain skills. And okay, the flyers are a bit lacking, let's be honest. And of course, Cavs have that mobility, the high range sort of shenanigans. If you take away that, then you kind of blend them all together, and homogenizing the meta and the game in general would make it a bit less interesting, in my opinion, though. So I'm not going to spend the whole video on this, but essentially, I hope it doesn't change very much. Now, I did mention earlier that dual skill isn't required in the A skill, but I also mentioned the dual skill isn't bad. Having 2 to all stats and 5 extra HP is actually just fine, like as an A skill. So you can swap it out, but you don't need to swap it out for something like, let's say, Sturdy Impact, or, you know, Push 4, or an ideal skill, I guess, could also work here. Like, work with what you have. And if I did this, I might honestly just like keep dual skill and just use the stats and whatnot that you have out of this. So yeah, I do think he's actually really solid in Arena, where you're actually quite limited in what you can do. with mobility, right? We only have like Change Fate, maybe some dual skills like Sigurd and Future Vision. So it's very limited in the mobility skills that we have in the game, which makes Yuri quite a nice addition to that. However, one thing I'll mention here is that with Arena and some of the higher tiers now, it's become very competitive that a unit that even scores at 180 like Yuri might not be enough scoring. In which case, something like saving for a duo hero that scores at 190, on potentially even 195 soon, is probably the way to go and is much more impactful because they're good anyways. The duo heroes are really good. So I don't know how to feel about this and the scoring, but he is going to be very powerful as an addition to Arena and for those of you that want to use him. That's basically all I'm going to talk about with Yuri in this particular video. I want to see how it pans out, and maybe we'll revisit him later if he ends up being very interesting. If I do see some Yuri clips, maybe I'll create some YouTube shorts. And if you want to see that, just let me know in the comments, I guess, or let me know in the comments as well what I might have missed from Yuri. But generally speaking, he's really cool, really good, definitely brings lots to the table, and I'm going to be a little bit patient on this one, see how it pans out. Next up is Múspell. So with Múspell, we're actually going to talk about what I think might be a little bit of a misinterpretation. And the reason for this is because you probably see Múspell's like stat spread and skills that he comes with, like ARD defense 4, and probably assume, even like using Niffle, you might assume that like AR defense is probably the way to go. And honestly, I'm going to be disagreeing with this for a couple reasons. I actually don't think that he's going to be that great on AR defense. The one thing that's going for him on AR defense is essentially that his weapon, Flame Lake Breath, will apply deep wounds, fatal smoke, even if he was to die. But the fact that he's a red cavalry is very competitive and honestly not even that good of a role to be in. And to make this as like visually obvious as possible, well, we have that guy, that girl, and those two. So as you can see, if you have access to any of those very influential red cavalry units, I find it hard to find a place for Múspell where he's gonna like really fit into a team slot. I feel like color diversity on AR defense is actually very important nowadays. You actually want to have a kind of a mix of colors, otherwise you risk losing to essentially one super tank of a particular color or a Raven Tome or whatever it might be. So like essentially if you put too much reds on your team, you're gonna probably see OG Micaiah, Blue Tome Micaiah, just completely steamroll your team. And that's an example of being too red heavy. And if you do it with every other color, there's always going to be some very impactful unit that does that. So you want to make sure you color coverage on defense, and Múspell, essentially because he has such fierce competition on defense, is going to set him back from being there. Now I did still want to provide an example of using him on defense and where he definitely could find some use, but of course I wanted to show you that, yeah, it's fairly competitive with red, and if you don't have those, then maybe Múspell could work for you. But yeah, before we go further though, his stats are also not really helping in this regard as an air defense unit. Lacking speed and no auto follow-up means that he's actually a low threat, low impact defense unit. He's essentially there to be annoying and provide like a single hit that chunks maybe an opponent but doesn't kill them. Despite his super high attack stat, despite having Domain of Flame, he essentially has no way of like securing kills against most tank units, and I am unfortunately not going to be like impressed by that as a result. If you want to use him though, then essentially you want to make sure you create as much of an annoying unit on defense as possible, and that would probably mean just keeping his AR defense res, keeping his Dragon Wall, probably using Quick Impulse, and then with that into units that don't use Special Fighter or Guard, he's going to like charge at Escutcheon and then likely survive a lot of these cases, apply his deep wounds, and just be really annoying and hard to kill, which is okay. I think that's okay, probably an okay way to use him. That does make him a little bit different from some of the other red examples given here, although to be fair, Dual Live and Legendary Sigurd are very resilient as well, so you kind of want to use him for his Domain of Flame utility, and Flame Lake Breath is where I think would be best used. Now, Domain of Flame is interesting. I don't feel it's the best for air defense as well, because all it does is like create more power on your defense, create more threat, I guess, like just trying to kill your opponent as hard as possible, which is still good to think about, but I feel like a lot of defense teams actually would embrace or appreciate bulk, something as a big contrast to Niffle, where I feel like Niffle's actually pretty solid on defense and pretty annoying to deal with because of flash, and on offense is competing with like Flame, where unfortunately she's not like as useful as like a healer or a colorless with Dazzle potentially, as opposed to Niffle. So there's a lot of like ways to look at this, but essentially Múspell I feel isn't that great on defense. He can be used, but he's not necessarily going to want to be there. And this is where we tie into where I feel his best place is actually, which is AR offense. Now, AR offense is extremely cool for someone like Múspell because he becomes one of the best support units, I'd say, in the game in a very unique role, which is essentially just super buffing his allies within 2 spaces. And I mean like super buffing them. So forget the Flame Link Breath or like even Link skill or anything like that. The way that he's really cool in this aspect is he's essentially providing a huge chunk of damage by comparing attack and res. He provides a joint drive attack and defense. So units that actually have like Brave effects, like Laszlo is shown here, or Winter Altina, or Vantage units, so someone like Brave Marth, for example, or even Kronia, which hasn't seen much relevance lately, but Vantage units who really focus on trying to get try to secure kills, tanks in general that want to like Brave and make sure they get those kills, are really going to benefit from something like Domain of Flame and this guy as an ally, because those units don't necessarily have to improve their bulk. If you're just killing the unit before you get hit, in the case of, like I said, Kronia or Marth, or even Laszlo, depending on the build you use, this is all really, really, really interesting, because with Múspell as an ally, you're going to get those kills way more frequently. So in AR offense, as a one-off, I feel like Múspell definitely is going to want to support units like this. There's a lot more that I obviously am not covering here, but essentially, I feel his place is offense, not really defense. And that's like a complete contrast to Niffle, where I feel she is better on defense as opposed to offense. But that doesn't mean you can't use them in either role. Also, his fodder as ARD Defense Res 4 and Dragon Wall are great additions to the game, where you can definitely hook up other units with those things. Alright guys, so that basically covers both Múspell and Yuri of this banner. I do think they're very unique in their own ways and add stuff to the game, but keep in mind they're permanent units. You don't necessarily have to spend your orbs here. You can wait till it plays out, see how they truly affect the meta over time, and this banner will come back 100%. It's gonna get voted in. It's 3 houses. Don't worry about it. Like literally you could wait it. But yeah, let's move on to comments on both what YouTube and my Patreon Discord community has kind of provided their thoughts with. So we'll start with both polls. As you can see here, it's still fairly similar. I think everyone is pretty much on the same page here. If someone is spending all their orbs, they probably have a favorite. I've seen this plenty of times now to tell you that if someone goes all in, they either don't have orbs or there's a favorite. So for example, like Yuri is like a favorite, or Constance or Happy or something. That makes complete sense. If you're saving for your favorites, then obviously this is the time to go for it. No one goes beyond, well, not many people go beyond 40 summons, and I'm glad to see that, because at that point you're pretty much gambling. So did you just want to go to a Spark, go all in, or just go for free summons and skip? Which is what it seems like a lot of people do, and I'm happy to see that, as we'll see in a moment with some of the comments, where people are saving for particular things in mind, and that'll keep you playing in the long term and not completely at the mercy of the gacha. So first comment here by Castler says, only free summon tickets. Múspell and Yuri seem quite fun to use on both AR offense or some gimmicky AR defense setup, but they do not feel like needed units. What I am more excited about instead is Yuri's assist skill, open up the chance for Legendary Lucina to get a remix that has a range 2 future vision. But I'm probably just high on Copium. Not really interested in the other 2 units since I've not played 3 House DLC and they do not seem to be as impactful. Okay, so yeah, that is actually a very strong point. Foul play is like our first instance of a range type of assist. I don't even think we have anything except Physic in this regard. I think Physic is like the only other ranged assist. I could be forgetting something, but this is the only thing that comes to mind. So a 3 range assist like this is really cool, and I'm glad to see it. I'm also interested to see how AI uses it, but I'm assuming it's something like like swap where it gets an enemy or a friend out of danger, and then the unit will cancel out of danger as well. That's how I think they'll use it, but we'll confirm that obviously like in a few days and see how it plays out. Yeah, but yeah, Lucina, we're gonna get buffed soon. Gonna be pretty cool to see that. And yeah, next comment by Yigo Fry says, Spark, Sea Dual Infantry 4 just in time for Soth Resplendent. Absolutely true. If you are a big Soth fan and you just got his Resplendent, and Soth is pretty good in Arena, and I just literally talked about Sea Dual Infantry 4 in that video, then yeah, you're probably gonna wanna maybe Spark for Sea Dual Infantry, if nothing else. And, well, here he is. Next comment by AO says, planning to either only use free summons or Spark Yuri. I love the combination of Kanto, increased movement, foul play, and his class type, which gives him access to a wide variety of strategies. He's currently the only one that can use both Disarm, Trap, and Kanto, and will probably remain unique for the foreseeable future. I agree. All of the banner units are fairly popular and will likely see many reruns, and a Forging Bonds revival, possibly even a Hall of Forms event like with the 3 main 3-house lords. This is very true. Like, with 3-house characters, we see plenty of reruns, we're gonna see them voted back in, and to be honest, someone like Yuri is like a prime candidate for Hero Fest. And I'm pretty sure we might even see something like that. So with some patience, you will probably see these characters in the future in your barracks accidentally, or they will just show up many banners where you're going to get plenty of choices to basically commit to them if you really wanted to. Unless a long-term AR roster change becomes necessary for me by the end of the banner, I'll wait and see how Yuri ages and keep my free summons, since my main priority is saving for merges on a light mythic that enables the extra rating slot. Okay, cool. Goals in mind are always important. And yeah, I mean, I'm personally going to also be just free summoning skipping, because as cool as the mechanics are, like, you can't really afford, especially as F2P, to be like chasing every single new toy, as unique or as cool as they might be. Also, if you wait, you can kind of see how exactly they impact the meta. For example, Dual Lift wasn't really that as impactful initially, or it wasn't perceived to be, and then he became a lot better over time, or at least retained his position of power over time, where when he came back, you're like, okay, like this is probably worth my orbs at this point, like when we had that double special recently. And of course, by the time his seasonal comes back, that could still very likely be the case. Finally, we have a YouTube comment by Pokey Emblem here, who says, this banner has some unique units and some very, very good fodder. I recommend anyone using range calves or flyers to consider trade skills. They are so useful. That said, none of my units in Arena or AR need this fodder. I'll pass this time. You can be assured this banner will revive next July, so there will be another time to spark this fodder if it ever becomes relevant. 3-house always wins revivals and always will, and that's true because recency bias, and a lot of casual players will likely want these characters one way or another, and voting them back in is definitely the way to go. So yeah, guys, that basically concludes my Should You Pull series, not series, but video on Abyss and Múspell. Definitely a cool banner in a permanent pool. I mean, it's probably more interesting than the seasonal genealogy banner we had, and a lot of really cool fodder has come from this banner. So I don't know what to think of it, but generally speaking, I appreciate new toys and mechanics being in the game and seeing others use it and potentially have access to it at some point or another. Thank you guys for watching. As always, if you want to see yourself featured in these comments or participate in these polls, consider supporting the channel with Patreon, which is in the description below. That goes a long way to making sure that I keep providing you with this high quality content, which does take many hours to produce, and I appreciate you guys that choose to do that. Smash the like button if nothing else. Sub if you haven't already. I know a lot of you are not, so maybe consider doing that if you enjoy the content. I'm out of here for the night or day. You have a good one. I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.
It's over.